right, good afternoon. This is Transportation Committee Chair Deb Barber. It is Monday, November 8th, 2021. Before I call the meeting to order, I'd like to say a few things about how we will conduct this meeting. I want to acknowledge that COVID-19 is causing us to alter our usual procedures. Due to the ongoing pandemic, Council Chair Zelli has determined that it is not reasonable or prudent to conduct in-person meetings at this time. Accordingly, Met Council members will participate in this meeting by phone or other electronic means, and this Transportation Committee meeting will be conducted under Minnesota Statute Section 13D.021. Because we are conducting this meeting electronically, all votes must be taken by roll call. Before we start the meeting, we need to establish whether there's a quorum. With that, Becky, could you call the roll, please?
Chambliss. Cummings.
Here.
Ferguson.
Here.
Fredson.
Here.
Gonzalez. Sterner. Zirin.
Present.
Barber.
Here. With that, we have a quorum, so I call to order the meeting of the Metropolitan Council Transportation Committee for November 8th, 2021. Our first order of business is approval of the agenda. Did anyone have any changes or additions to the agenda? All right, seeing and hearing none, the agenda is approved, and we move on to approval of the minutes. And it's the minutes from the October 25th, 2021 meeting. Did anyone have changes or additions? All right, seeing and hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Cummings moves approval.
It's moved by Cummings. Is there a second?
Ferguson will second.
Seconded by Ferguson. Is there any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none, Becky, could you call the roll, please?
Chambliss. Cummings.
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Fredson.
Aye.
Gonzalez. Sterner. Zirin.
Aye.
Barber.
Aye. With that, the minutes are approved. Next, we're on to our TAAC report. I believe Mr. Finley is joining us tonight. Welcome, David.
Hello again, Chair Barber, council members. Good to be here in November. Good afternoon, even though it's a little bit dark to be the afternoon. David Finley here, Chair of the Transportation Accessibility Advisory Committee. We had a jam-packed meeting last week. The only thing that I want to update you all on, though, is we did hear from Lieutenant Ahmed and Leslie Candaras on the police work group that Councilmember Chambliss is running. I think the report is done or almost done. But we were very happy to get an update on policing on Metro Transit services. We did bring this up 2 months ago, and then you all so aptly responded very, very quick, and we got an update on the police work group. We were happy to hear that there are, I think, at least 2 folks with disabilities who serve on that work group, so that perspective is being taken into consideration. There was a little bit of interest in a potential overlap, but I would leave that up to Councilmember Chambliss. But we are, as always, very much willing to provide any input that would be of interest to that work group. But we're happy that it exists. We're more than happy that the disability perspective has been brought to the work group. And that's really all I have for today. Everything else I have chatted with you all about in the past, so I don't see any reason to take up any more time. But I appreciate being here, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, David. Are there any questions from council members? I just have a comment. I'm glad that we were able to get that to work out so well, because the police work group will be reporting officially back in February. So I think there's probably other opportunities. I think in December they're going to do some more public facing meetings, but we can make sure that information gets to you and the rest of TAAC as well. But I'm really glad to hear that you were able to get that connection going, because I think that is an important voice that needs to be part of the conversation. So glad to hear it. All right, thank you, David. Now we're on to reports. We have MTS Director, Acting Director, Amy Venowitz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one item for tonight, and that is about Metro Mobility. On October 26th and 28th, Metro Mobility held a community conversation with our customers, advocates, and stakeholders. You'll remember we had a few of these pre-COVID, so they were very well attended. This event was held virtually, which did allow us to have a big group session and then small group breakout sessions. And our customers were asked to provide us feedback on their experience on a variety of subjects, including the new services that we provided during the pandemic, such as the curbside service and also the grocery delivery. And then just give us basic feedback on our overall performance for Metro Mobility. We had 34 guests participate in the sessions, and then there was a good back and forth question and answer with staff and also contractors who participated. So overall, the attendance was not quite as high as it had been in the past when we had in-person sessions, but it was overall pretty good attendance, and we got good feedback, and we're planning on hosting more similar events in the future. So that is all I have on that item. And then I did want to comment on the consent agenda. Some of you probably have noticed that there's a number of TIP amendments that are included, quite a bit more than you might normally see on a Transportation Committee agenda. And this is primarily due to we have been somewhat piling these up and waiting as TAB approved them, as we were waiting for the federal approval on the 2022 through 25 TIP. And so some of these amendments were in front of TAB as early as last August and September, and we've been holding them until the final TIP approval, which we received last week. So we quickly moved them all onto this agenda to get them passed and incorporated into the newly approved TIP. And we do have Joe Barbeau online, so if anyone has any additional questions about the consent agenda, he can provide any more details on that. Then that is all I have.
Thank you, Amy. Are there any questions from council members? All right, seeing and hearing that, we can go on to Metro Transit General Manager Koistra.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. As I have in the past, I'll start by providing an update on the COVID case numbers. Since the start of the pandemic, we've had now 570 total cases among Metro Transit employees, and this includes 23 new cases just since our October 25 meeting. For context, we've had 33 cases in the month of October compared to 25 cases in the month of September. With respect to operator hiring, this week we are at 78 operators short of our ideal level. This is about where we were last meeting when I reported that I believe I reported that we were down 77 operators. We currently have 22 operators in training. The next hiring open house events are set for November 13 and November 16 in our training center next to Haywood Garage and offices in Minneapolis. As we discussed last meeting, our December 4 service changes will better align our schedules with our current operator workforce levels. And Adam Harrington will be providing more specific information on these changes later in this meeting. We have began communicating publicly about these changes beginning last week. And then I want to conclude with recognizing some really good news. The U.S. House passed the infrastructure bill last Friday, so that goes to the president. Nationwide, this includes an additional $39 billion of new money for public transit. We're waiting for more information from FTA to fully assess what this means for us, but it's safe to say that this is really good news for our region. Generally speaking, the bill includes additional formula and state of good repair funds. It adds funding for transit expansion and facility improvements. There's funding for low and no emissions grant program, for which we have successfully competed for grants in the past to advance both our electric bus program and our low sulfur diesel bus program. And of course, this bill offers many other transportation funding benefits to our region that go well beyond Metro Transit. So once we receive more details from the FTA and from others, Metro Transit will join with MTS to come back to the committee with a fuller and more specific region-wide report via an information item as soon as we have that information available. So with that, I'm available for questions.
Great. Thank you, Wes. Are there questions from council members? All right. Seeing and hearing none, we can move on to our business for the evening. Our first item of business is the consent agenda. As Amy had mentioned, there are 9 items on consent tonight. Did anyone have any questions or comments? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the items on consent.
Cummings moves.
Moved by Cummings.
Fresnel
Is there a
second.
seconded by
Fresnel
Fredson?
second.
Thank you. Are there any other, is there any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none, Becky, could you call the roll, please?
Chambliss, Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Gonzalez, Sterner,
Aye.
Zirin,
Aye.
Barber.
Aye. With that, the items on consent are passed. Next, we move to our non-consent items. The first item is business item 2021-277, a joint same week item. It's the 2021 November capital budget amendment, and we have Ed Petrie and Heather Augustin-Huebner here to present.
Good afternoon, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Welcome.
Great, beautiful. Thank you. Heather and I are here this evening to present business item 2021-277, same week. As the chair mentioned, this is a same week item. The reason it's the same week is we have only one council meeting in the month of November. So we're bringing this item, a same week item. There's only a few pieces in this thing. For Metro Transit, we're actually closing 3 projects that have been completed. The meat of the adjustment or the amendment this evening is first of all, for the Purple Line BRT project, where we're bringing in $39.9 million of funding from Ramsey County and the Ramsey County Regional Railroad Authority. This is for the Purple Line. And then we're also bringing in $130,000 of RTC funds to purchase 2 non-rev vehicles to work on real-time signs and enunciators. And with that, Chair, that is my portion of the amendment, and I would stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ed. Any questions from council members? All right, I will turn it over to Heather.
Right, Chair Barber, committee members, are you able to hear me?
Yep, welcome.
Thank you. The MTS portion of the amendment is really simple tonight. What we're doing is a routine funding swap of moving $1 million of MVEST revenues from our contracted services operating budget to the capital program, and $1 million of federal funds to be transferred from the capital program to the contracted services operating budget. This is routine. This is I come back to you nearly every budget amendment or every other budget amendment, making sure that we have the right color of money supporting the right projects. In this case, MVTA submitted 3 projects for their federal formula earnings. We usually back those with RTC. These projects are not bond eligible, so we'll be backing them with motor vehicle sales tax instead. The proposed amendment programs available state, federal, other, and regional funds to the unified budget and allow the council to carry out our work plan and its long-term capital program. The amendment demonstrates a commitment towards asset preservation and also supports the Thrive outcome of stewardship by assessing the future needs, responsible planning, and management of resources for Metro Transit and the Metropolitan Transportation Services divisions. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Heather. Are there any questions from council members? All right, seeing and hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2021-277, joint same week item.
Cummings moves approval.
Moved by
Zarin,
Cummings, is
second.
there, seconded by Zarin. Is there any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none, Becky, could you call the roll, please?
Chambliss, Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Gonzalez, Sterner, Zirin,
Aye.
Barber.
Aye. With that, the motion carries. We're on,
Thank
thank
you.
you, Heather and Ed. Next, we're on to business item 2021-314. It's a joint powers agreement between Minnesota Department of Public Safety, Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. I believe Dana Jabs is presenting.
Good afternoon. This is Leah Palmer with the Metro Transit Police Department, and Dana is also on the call here too. We are asking Transportation Committee to approve a joint powers agreement, for the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension so that we can have access to the Criminal Justice Information Center data. It's a standard thing that we do every 5 years. It costs the department $5,400 over those 5 years. So it's a relatively small amount of money, but state law does require us to appear before you and ask for your blessing.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council members?
Zarin
All right.
moves the item.
It's moved by Zarin. Is there a second?
Cummings seconds.
Seconded by Cummings. Is there any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none, Becky, could you call the roll, please?
Chambliss, Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Gonzalez, Sterner, Zirin,
Aye.
Barber.
Aye. With that, the motion carries. Thank you very much, Leah and Dana. On to our final business item for the evening. It's business item 2021-325. It's rust mitigation for Bombardier light rail vehicles. And we have Ryan Mateague and I think Chris Royston here tonight.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you, Madam Chair and council members. I'm Ryan McTeague. I'm the Director of Light Rail Vehicle Maintenance, and I'm here today with Jay Wesley, who's our Project Manager for Rail, and Christopher Royston, Manager of Overhaul and Special Projects. We're here to review business item 2021-035, which seeks approval to move forward on awarding some extensive project work for our aging Type 1 vehicles, more specifically towards rust mitigation and fleet upgrades in support of ongoing preservation for our 27 Bombardier vehicles. We do have a brief presentation that will accompany this business item, which will highlight some of the examination that we considered in bringing forth the proposed action. If there are no objections, I'd like to turn it over to Jay Wesley to review the presentation, and then would be happy to answer any questions you have regarding the business item or the presented material.
Sounds good. Thank you, Ryan.
Great, thank you. I'll introduce Jay Wesley.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Madam Chair and council members. I'll provide some background on the necessity for bringing this business item forward today. The Light Rail Vehicle Maintenance Department is tasked with ensuring a state of good repair on our light rail vehicle assets, otherwise known as LRVs for short. Next slide, please. Our LRVs operate in the same environment as over-the-road vehicles do, where ice, snow, salt, and sand all kind of combined in the winter months to encourage rust and corrosion on our trains. Once rust has taken hold, it will progress until it's addressed, or the metal will degrade. So the crux of our issue that we're facing is to try to get to that rust before it progresses to an advanced stage. The level of effort required to address rust on each train in the fleet will increase every year that passes before we're able to get to that vehicle. Our projections for the overall completion of this rust mitigation work are informed by our experience working a sample of LRVs from both the Type 1 and Type 2 fleets. Our current staff and pacing, along with a small projected annual increase in effort per LRV, leads us to project that eventually we might arrive in a situation where we'll jeopardize maintaining a state of good repair for the entire fleet. We evaluated the possibility of increasing our current staffing level in the paint and body department where this work is performed, but due to trends in hiring, this does not appear to be a viable option. Next slide, please. By September of this year, we had received 41 applications for open LRV maintenance technician positions within our group. Out of that group of applications, 2 led to successful hires. As we drill into the number of applications that we received by month, there was a downward trend over the course of the year. And because of that trend, we anticipate placing the number of staff needed for this effort to be a multi-year endeavor. With that realization, it became apparent that outsourcing at least a portion of this work would be necessary. Next slide, please. We want to find a path forward that gives our in-house staff the ability to perform this work as an ongoing program, which means keeping the effort per LRV within a level that they can support. We believe that the best option to do this is to outsource the remaining Type 1 rust mitigation work. And this will allow our current staff to work on the much larger Type 2 fleet while the effort per LRV remains at a manageable level. If we were to wait to take on this type of action, outsourcing the Type 2 fleet later would be a much costlier endeavor. Next slide, please. Our request for proposals to address this need yielded a viable option with a company called Railcar Co. This company has expertise in the exact same type of work, and in fact, they've demonstrated doing a nearly identical project on LRVs with TriMet in Portland, Oregon. An internal panel was convened to evaluate the strength of their proposal, and that group recommended to proceed with this option. Therefore, it is our recommendation that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute contract 20P035 with Railcar Co. for rust mitigation and fleet improvement services on the Bombardier Type 1 LRVs in an amount not to exceed $7.7 million, $4,246. With that, Madam Chair, Ryan McTeague, Chris Royson, and myself would be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Great, thank you, Jay. So are there any questions from council members? Councilmember Cummings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering if in general, I understand the need for this rust mitigation, but I'm wondering in general, given that transit has dropped during the pandemic and the LRVs were out less and less, are we expecting longer use and less repair and less mitigation of wear and tear in the coming years, or how does that factor in?
Well, we do anticipate that just operating in this environment and our climate kind of fosters the situation for us to be able to take hold. And so just any usage in winter months with these vehicles will encourage this condition to be present, regardless of how many miles the vehicles actually travel.
And if I may, I'll just add that the usage of our vehicles has not declined to date. Although ridership has been below average, we have been providing the vehicles to support the necessary spacing, the 6-foot recommendations, and give our passengers that comfort of being able to space as you would any other place.
Yes. Chair, Madam Chair, Councilmember Harper, certainly mileage does play a factor, but so does time. So once the LRVs are exposed to an environment, they're going to be in a constant state of rust, needing rust mitigation, whether they're in service or not.
Councilmember Cummings?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a follow-up comment. No, I understand that we have this. I just know that with my car having been in the garage so much over the last 18 months, almost 2 years now, that the wear and tear has gone down significantly. So I understand that we're continuing to use the vehicles. I just was wondering in general. So I appreciate your answers. Thank you.
Councilmember Zarin?
Yes, thank you, Chair Barber. My question is this work going to be done here locally, or do we have to pull panels off and ship it to another state? Does a rail car co have facility here in the Twin Cities area?
Chair, Councilmember, the LRVs will be shipped to Louisiana, a small city called Tallulah, and that's where the work will be performed at.
Follow up.
Go ahead, Councilmember Zarin.
How do you get them there?
Heavy rail, flatbed.
All right, additional questions or comments? So I have one question. How much longer will this extend the life of the LRVs?
Chair, Councilmember, as you know, we are required to keep the vehicles in service minimum of 30 years. Without rust mitigation, it will certainly shorten their lifespan. And to keep the vehicles in a state of good repair, rust mitigation is required. We anticipate keeping the vehicles in service for as long as 40 years. How much further rust mitigation will be dependent upon, as we do monthly examinations on the vehicles and what we see in regard to rust mitigation.
Very good, thank you. Are there any additional questions from council members? All right, seeing and hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2021-325.
Motion to approve this item by
Thank you.
Councilmember
Moved by
Chambliss.
Councilmember Chambliss. And is
Chair.
there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Fredson.
Chair, I was going to ask.
sorry.
I was attempting to
Oh.
weigh in on discussion, and I missed that window, so I'm wondering if it's too late.
No, we'll take a second and then we can open it back up for discussion, if that works for you. All right, then I look for a second on the motion.
Zarin seconds.
Seconded by Zarin. And now, is there any other discussion? So, Councilmember Fredson.
Yeah, I just wondered if there was any opportunity to delay this decision for a week. I only proposed that because I've been on the receiving end of some communications from folks that have concerns, and just don't know if those have been adequately addressed by the discussion.
Councilmember, Chair.
Go ahead.
The solicitation happened last spring, and we have did as much due diligence as possible in answering any questions that have been presented to us. And we're at the stage now where we have held off the vendor who made the bid, but they're needing to raise prices if we don't move forward. So if that answers your question, if we delay them any further, we might lose the offer altogether.
Thank you, Chris. Councilmember Chambliss.
Yeah, I'm just curious if you may, Councilmember Fredson, share, at least confidentially, what some of the concerns might be.
Well, it's a public meeting, so it wouldn't be confidential, and that's fine. My point is, just during this meeting, I've received some communications from folks that are concerned about this, a constituent, and it would be helpful from my standpoint, to at least delay action on the item, or I guess if we were to take action as a transportation committee, we could take those concerns up at full council.
Councilmember Chambliss.
Yes, and by confidential, I meant disclosing the person who had the issue. What I'm asking is, can you share what the issue is?
Concern relates.
It's hard for me to make a decision on delay if I don't know what the issue is.
Chair.
Councilmember Fredson.
Thank you. Yeah. So the concern that's been voiced now by and look, my frustration is that this has been on a public agenda that I'm only hearing about during this meeting, but it is from a constituent asking a question related to the transportation or expressing concern about the transportation down to Louisiana for this, and so I just from my standpoint now feel like I need to at least ask folks to press the pause button or just let you know that I would look into this further and then potentially raise up any concerns at full council.
May I ask a question as to when we anticipate this will go to full council? In December? I don't know.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Council, I believe the date that was given to me was December 8th, so a month from today for council. So I believe that should give you opportunity to address any concerns in the meantime.
And I'd be happy to recommend that it move non-consent.
You
All right,
could
with that,
also just do the same week item next transportation committee and get the information.
I didn't hear.
we could,
I said you could do a same week item at the next transportation committee, have the information presented here, and then move it at council.
or we could have it, move it tonight and come back with some informational item at the next transportation committee and move it to the count, keep it on the track for the full council approval in December.
I'd like to make a motion that it moves tonight.
We already have a motion in a second, so so we're on track for that. We just need to vote and then decide. So with that, if there's no other discussion, I'll ask one more time. All right, then Becky, could you call the roll, please?
Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
I'll abstain. Thank you.
Gonzalez, Sterner, Zirin,
Aye.
Barber.
Aye. With that, the item passes and we'll move to the full council on non-consent so we can address some of the open questions and we'll make a determination if we need to have an informational item at the next transportation committee.
Very good.
Okay, very good. All right. So with that, that concludes our business for the evening. So items 1 and 3 will go non-consent to the full council. Number 2, I think, can go consent if everyone's in agreement.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Now we will then move on to our information items. And before we do, I just want to make sure that the public knows that Councilmember Chambliss has joined us, and also that Councilmember Sterner is here, but he is having some audio difficulties. Just so everyone is aware. All right. On to information then. The first one is Q3 2020 Ridership Report, and we have Eric Lind and John Harper here. All right, John and Eric, can you guys hear me?
Madam Chair, I can hear you. This is Eric.
Okay.
I think John was trying to lead off here, and I don't know what's going on with his audio, but not working.
Okay. The joys of technology. We all have been there.
Well, why don't I get started and see if John can join. John, are you
Can
there?
you hear me now, Madam Chair?
Yes, I can.
Okay, very good. All right. So I'll present this way without my headphones then. So sorry about the technology issue. Seems like we're all having those today. So as I was saying, I am the manager of contracted transit service in MTS, and Eric Lind on the presentation with me is manager of analytics and research at Metro Transit. And we're here to provide the third quarter ridership report. So next slide, please. I am going to go through some high-level summary slides. Eric will then present a little bit of a deep dive into a particular topic that he can talk about, and then provide some takeaways, and then we're here to answer some questions for you. So just real broadly speaking, we are, it is good news in this presentation. We, as you can see by the green line here, if you can see your colors, we in 2021 are beginning to recover from COVID. We are showing the line at the top, that's the red line, is 2019 ridership, just to provide a pre-COVID reference point here. So we are beginning our long ascent out of COVID ridership and returning towards pre-COVID, but we still have quite a ways to go, and we can talk through some of those items as we go through our short presentation here. So next slide, please. I do want to point out that we have incorporated the 2019 annual year-to-date total at the top of the first few slides here, just to give a reference point. We are, and I also want to point out that the year-to-date comparison 21 to 2020 has those first 3 months of 2020 where the ridership was still pre-COVID. And so you're going to see some slides like this one here where the 2021 ridership is lower than 2020. That's because those 3 pre-COVID months are included in the 2020 numbers. But this slide shows you that the commuter and express service, the yellow bar, has really become very small in 2020 and 2021, and local bus and rail service has really carried our ridership across the COVID timeframe. And that is something we've been talking about for the last number of presentations to this committee. So next slide, please. This next slide here shows the year-to-date changes in each of the modes and type of service. And I'll again say that first quarter of last year, pre-COVID, bolsters those numbers. And so a lot of these numbers are down or relatively even, and that's because of that. So, but I just want to show this as year-to-date. And we can move on to the next slide, which shows Q3 only. And we are, as I mentioned at the beginning, showing some rebound in Q3 of 2021 compared to Q3 of 2020. And I will point out a couple of items in my work area. So Metro Mobility and Transit Link service are both within the MTS work area. And in 2020, third quarter, the Metro Mobility ridership was about 50% of pre-COVID. We are now up near 75% of pre-COVID. And so we are seeing quite a rebound in our Metro Mobility program. And that really is demand ridership coming back. So as Metro Mobility eligible riders are returning to their normal routines or more normal routines, that ridership is adjusting back. Transit Link likewise was at 40% of pre-COVID this time last year and is now at 55% of pre-COVID. So We have a lot of room left to grow, to return to where we've been, but we are certainly beginning to climb the hill towards pre-COVID. And that's just, those two examples of programs where we are beginning to see the rebound and beginning to see people utilize those services. And I do want to make a side comment at this point to say that within TransitLink, we are continuing to do food shelf delivery, which we've been doing throughout COVID, and we will continue to do that until ridership rebounds and puts a constraint on our capacity. So let's go to the next slide. And this just shows, if you take the various bus types of service, this shows that the recovery has not been entirely equal, but Express, as we know, dropped much lower than the others as compared to pre-COVID levels. And so Express has been rebounding, and Eric, I'll hand it over to Eric at this point. He will talk through what underlies that 113% number. So Eric, please.
Thanks, Madam Chair and council members, and thanks, John. Yeah, I think we can characterize this as a really good COVID-era ridership report. We're seeing growth in all the modes, as you're seeing here. Next slide, please. So one thing I wanted to focus on was the Commuter and Express ridership. And as you can see, the 2021 numbers have been consistently higher through most of the year, and especially this summer and early into the fall to the end of that third quarter. Largely, as you know, we've also been still running a very reduced service when it comes to Commuter and Express, and Adam Harrington will describe our further plans for that Express service coming up. But despite that reduced service, we did see increases as the fall began, largely around routes serving the University of Minnesota, as well as those downtown office commutes. And it's that downtown office commutes that we have all been talking about for a long time during the pandemic, wondering how those were going to change in this COVID era and how that was going to impact ridership. So I just wanted to highlight one thing that we've been seeing as a consistent pattern in the ridership numbers. So next slide. And this is a little zoom in, little pop out on the 1 week at the end of September. But this is actually a pattern we've seen continuing through October. And it's maybe not surprising to some of you who have been talking to your colleagues or in fact your own workplaces about patterns of being in office. We can really see how people's telecommute patterns show up in their decisions to travel on transit. So essentially you see where there's a Monday, which is that first dot there just below 4,000 rides on Express bus in that particular week. Monday's about it's a little depressed compared to the middle of the week. So we have a Tuesday, which is usually the high point, Wednesday and Thursday close behind, and then Friday you see is again a very significant drop from any of the prior days of the week. So as we see this consistent pattern of ridership, it matches data we have from other sources about how people are choosing to line up their Commuter and Express, their Telework schedules. In other words, what days a week they're going to be in the office. And so it just makes a lot of sense, and it may have implications for how we think about our service later on. But I wanted to highlight that as one kind of interesting facet of the data as we look at our COVID recovery. Next slide, please. So really, just a few takeaways. This is real growth, ridership growth. We've seen increases. This is COVID era. As John said, we're a long way from 2019, but we have seen very steady ridership. We did see a real jump in September. It's continued, as a preview of the Q4 ridership. October was also very strong. A lot of that was returned to schools and offices. We also, just to remind you, we're running a fare promotion during the fall. So in September and October, all point of sale rides were $1. So there was no peak surcharge, and we did see good response to that. That promotion's over, but we also had promotions on some of our past programs that have continued. So that is part of the mix as well. And what we're trying to do internally is unravel the influence of all these different facets, whether it's behavior or to do with the fare promotion. But as you can imagine, that's probably a little bit hard to disentangle. All in all, there are a lot of factors that were promoting a little bit of increased ridership, and we saw those happen. I mentioned this telework impact on express ridership. That's something from all the surveys and data that we've seen is not likely to be a short-term trend. Telework is going to be part of what we understand about express ridership for a long time to come. And then finally, just to highlight, going back to those first couple slides, where we're at, it's unlikely that we're going to beat 2020. If we think about the next 3 months, it would be a lot to overcome the fact that the first 2 months of 2020 were in that quote unquote normal pre-COVID situation. So just flagging that even though this was a strong ridership month, we're still going to be probably coming in around or a little bit lower than we did at an annual basis for 2020. And with that, I'd be happy to stand with John for any questions.
Thank you very much, Eric and John. Questions from council members or comments? Councilmember Cummings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for this information. It's really interesting, and I realize that it's through the third quarter. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit more specifically about the impact that the St. Paul Public School kids riding the buses has on these statistics, and what it might mean if that were to go away, or just kind of how that factors into all of this.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Cummings, yes, we definitely see an impact of the high school service, both Minneapolis and St. Paul public schools. We see it in a couple of different ways. One, the routes that are showing resilience and increased ridership. So the routes in St. Paul that are serving schools. And also the time of day of the boarding. So we have pretty fine-grained idea of when people are riding. What we're seeing right now is 2 peaks, and one at 7 a.m., one at about 3 p.m. So you really do see the influence of high school student travel, which of course is wrapping up in that 3 p.m. hour, popping out in the data. So what I'd characterize it as the high school market is contributing significantly to our increased fall ridership.
And Madam Chair and Councilmember Cummings, I will add one sort of anecdotal tidbit as well. The niche that contracted fixed route provides for the council is smaller than standard bus type service. And so we run 30-foot transit bus, we run cutaway style transit bus. And we're very careful as we, and Adam can talk about this if this comes up in his presentation, we're very careful about what service is operated by Metro Transit, what service is operated in the contract environment because of that. And the school trips have kind of thrown that off kilter a little bit for us, because where we've had, I'll give you an example, Lexington Avenue is run in a cutaway style bus, the Route 83, and that has one trip now with 25 or 30 kids who want to ride, and the bus has a little more than 20 seats. And so, we get this one trip where there's no demand, and we're trying to address what do you do with that by putting a different vehicle on, providing a supplemental trip, those kinds of things in order to protect the trip and to allow those students to ride. So it has done some things like that, as well as bolster the ridership, as Eric has talked about.
Councilmember Cummings.
Follow up. Thank you. I would like to thank you for this data, and I think that it's, again, I thank you, all of the team that works on this. It is so important to be able to have this data available to analyze, again, when these opportunities come up during challenging times, to pivot and provide aid or assistance where it wasn't expected or hasn't normally been part of what Metro Transit does. So I think collecting this data, analyzing this data, watching it closely is really important for transit to know how best to respond. I mean, every day is a new challenge, and And so thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for the report. I think it's really interesting, and I think it's important to inform the upcoming decisions that we're going to need to continue to make during this sort of transitionary time as we come out of COVID. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cummins.
On to Councilmember Chambliss.
Yes, I just wanted to say it's great getting these updates along the way, as we have been, especially during the pandemic, and encouraging that ridership is starting to pick up a little bit. So hopefully that trend continues, and looking forward to getting some more positive reports.
Madam Chair and council members, if I may, my group in MTS and Eric and his group at Metro Transit try hard to come up with things that are different in each presentation. So we're not just providing you the same quarterly update with a little movement of ridership and so on. And you know, it's been fun for me to see Eric's part of the presentation that he adds in to dissect these little pieces that kind of fly under the radar. And you know, and I guess I'll say to the committee members, if there are things that you are curious about that kind of run below the surface, and you think, you know, what is it behind the numbers? We can certainly look to bring those out to you in this kind of, as Eric just provided today, where he took the week and he says, you know, there's monthly numbers in Express, but look at the daily breakdown and look how it's different than it used to be. And so we have the opportunity, we have a lot of data behind the scenes, and we can bring those forward. And so I guess I'm opening up, you know, to sort of the broader opportunity to the committee to say, if there are things that interest you about the numbers, please ask about those, and we can see if we can bring them into the presentation to keep it fresh to you. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for your comments. Councilmember Chambliss, you had a follow-up?
You saw my little finger. Yeah, but so the only thing I think I would be curious is if we can have information pre-COVID in the reports for bus ridership, just so we can kind of see how far away we are from that, because we were still in, you know, COVID in 2020.
And I would add the other thing that I'd be interested in was really continuing to track just what you did with breaking it down by the daily trends, especially with commuter, because we're going to figure out, I think, after the new year fairly quickly which days people are choosing to work who are choosing the hybrid model. And I'll be really curious to see how that works and then how we adapt for it. But I'm really happy to see sort of the cross-pollination work between MTS and Metro Transit. I think that you guys have been providing us with some really good information throughout all of this, and so no, it's much appreciated. And I appreciate the ask too, that, you know, if there's things that we want to look for. So trust us, we're not shy, so we will if we need to. So, all right, are there any other questions or comments from council members? All right. Well then, thank you very much, John and Eric. Have a good evening and appreciate this very much.
Thank you.
Next, we are on to our final information item. It's a transit service update for December. We have Adam Harrington here. Welcome, Adam.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. This presentation will fit nicely with what you just heard. And so I'm going to give a little bit of a refresher from some of the information that Brian Funk and I presented at the last time, talking about the bus operator shortage. And so we can go right into the next slide. So you recall that we're running at about 80 bus operators short of where we'd like to be for full-time service. And these are largely full-time operators that we're short right now. We've been hiring continuously since March 2021 and have had many in-person fairs to attract new operators and bonuses and referrals, and it's still been a challenging market to hire in. And of course, during that time, we've missed some work for our customers. They're notified via e-rider alert that happens the day of those reductions when they happen. And just a reminder that we're carrying 1,100 plus bus operators across 5 garages. And so it's a logistical challenge every day that our bus operations department does a great job handling and trying to get that information out. But one of the important things is that, as you just saw, our ridership remains below our 2019 levels. And at the same time, for our local service, we're running between 90 and 100% of what our scheduled service was in 2019. And when we look at the next slide, we can see what some of the effects of that have been. You've seen this before, but this is just a representation of the number of trips that have been lost via the Rider Alert app as a notification measure. So back in January on the left part of this slide, it's pretty minimal. But as we get into August and September, it spikes up quite a bit. And if we had October on this slide, it would continue to grow graphically on here. So we're trying to manage a situation where we're providing confidence to our customers that the service that we tell them that we're going to provide, we are actually providing. And so we're not alone in this battle to make sure we've got operators. And we look at the next slide, just some examples of other systems around the country. These are transit system stories that have been referenced where they're short operators. And the other thing that was brought up in the previous presentation is St. Paul schools. One of the ways that we're helping them out is providing passes to a number of their high schools, which we're happy to do, but we continue to be limited in our ability to add more service and capacity on those routes. And that's a function of St. Paul schools and others that are in the same boat. They're struggling to hire operators, and we'll continue to provide good service for their students throughout the rest of the school year as well. Next slide. Another piece of information that we're tracking along, and Eric talked about this as well. This is just a sample. Of course, downtown St. Paul and businesses around the region are also important, but it's a big bellwether for how we look at when our office commuters are coming back to a regular schedule. And there's 2 blocks of time on the bar chart on the left. So the Downtown Council surveyed employers in both May of 2021 and September of 2021. That's wave 1 is May, and you can see on the left, those gray bars are indications of when they thought employees would be coming back to the office. So back in May, they were thinking, and we were too, that a lot of people would be coming back to the office in September. Well, that didn't happen for all the reasons that we've been experiencing with COVID and changes in the office environment. And so now in September, when they did that same survey, many employers said they weren't going to come back until January. And that's still the case now for a number of larger employers, although a significant number came back in September, and they continue to trickle in mostly on a hybrid basis. So the chart on the right shows how many days per week people would be coming in, and you can see that 3 days per week is the preferred option. And that matches pretty well with the information that Eric shared in his data, looking at what we're actually seeing Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday being higher days of ridership. So we're trying to track with this closely and trying to tailor our service to that end. And so for the December 4th pick, just not even a month away, we've got a number of changes to make sure that we've got reliable service for our customers and that the service that we schedule is something that they can count on. So let's go to the next slide. On October 23rd, we actually implemented a schedule change for LRT that would reduce that frequency whenever we are operating every 10 minutes, which is most of the day on weekdays and a good part of the day, Saturday and Sunday, from 10 minutes down to 12. And that allows us to take a couple trains out of the system and still provide a high frequency of service and better manage that operator workforce. But as I mentioned for bus, when you have 1,100 operators, it's very difficult to make a couple tweaks and get down to that number. So our goal for December 4th is reduce our bus operator requirement to about 60. And of course, that's not the 80 I mentioned previously, but we believe between our hiring efforts and our past experience in being able to deliver reliable service with a much smaller deficit, we'll be able to do that. So I want to mention that our service development team, which has been doing tremendous work over the past 18 months trying to manage the system between all the ebbs and flows of COVID situations and healthcare guidance and making sure our customers and our operators are safe. They've done a really great job in focusing in on these 4 principles for how we make adjustments in December. Looking at equity, how these services might impact communities of color, low income, what are the alternate services customers might have, whether it's another route on the same corridor, or it's just a frequency adjustment, or even if they have an auto alternative if they're parking riders. Of course, we want to minimize impact to ridership, and that's something we always have an eye towards. But what's really important is preserving the core frequency of our service every 10 and 15 minutes. That's something that's strong throughout our system. And while we're going to be talking about reductions, I want to remind everyone that we still have a lot of service out there. We have 90 to 95% of our pre-pandemic service operating. It's very strong and convenient, and it's going to be even more reliable when we implement some of these changes. Next slide. I'm going to pass over this one because it's really admiring the ridership deficit that we're at, and I would only comment that it's in reference of the scale of service that we're providing. So we're down about 50% on some of our services, but we're still providing 90 to 100% of pre-pandemic levels. So we have capacity in our system to accommodate some of these trims. Next slide. So these are the types of adjustments that we're making for December 4th, and some will be easier for customers to adjust to than others. It might be a significant impact to some of our customers. We'll be reducing some of our Commuter Express service. We're suspending a couple routes that have park and ride options in the same corridor, but we're also maintaining that structure of service so that we have a route from all points of the compass into the downtowns. So it's an important framework that we can build on as that office commute starts to come back. We're reducing frequency on some of our local routes. A-line is going to every 12 minutes from every 10, very similar to what we're doing on LRT. Red line is going from every 20 to every 30 minutes on weekdays. We have some local Saturday routes that have some reductions, and we're suspending some local routes that do have alternative service and are more or less lower ridership. I also mentioned that we are implementing the Orange Line on December 4th and the connecting routes to it, albeit at a slightly scaled back frequency. We're really excited about this because it implements not just the service, but the stations and access and the vehicles and fare collection enhancements that go along with this project. So it'll set the table for growth on into the future. Now the next several slides, I believe, are the maps that show, oh, we got one more, and then we'll get into the maps. So what this represents, you can go back one, Greg. So the service adjustment represents about a 5% system-wide service reduction by the hours of service we put on the street. So that's about 60 operators. That means we're still operating 90+% of our service. So we're restructuring the Bloomington routes as part of Orange Line, but we also have 54 routes that are impacted. And so that means we've got 16 routes that are suspended overall, and the balance of them have some level of reduction. So you'll look at the upcoming maps and they will have probably an impact because there's a lot of geography covered, but remember they are not all suspensions, and it's kind of the negative view of the photograph because there's a lot of good service that we operate today. So on the upper right-hand corner of this slide is the key. So the yellow orange lines are related to the Orange Line. It could be a restructuring of a route. The purple lines are suspended. The blue lines are those routes that have frequency reductions, and the green lines have frequency reductions or are restructured to accommodate segments that would have otherwise not had service. Next slide. So here's the view of the system. It looks like a lot. Remember, it's 5% of the total that's out there today. And just to provide a picture of where these reductions are taking place, I'll choose a couple routes to talk about. One is the 84 along Snelling Avenue. And this is a route that has been operating since the beginning of A-Line and actually superseded A-Line in previous years. But it is going to be suspended, and that will be primarily served by the A-Line, which provides service every 12 minutes. And we're also restructuring the Route 87, and you can kind of see the little teal colored line that goes down to West 7th near the river, and that is a extension of the Route 87 to cover some of that area. The purple lines, again, are the ones that are suspended. You'll see a number of Commuter Express routes. You'll see some local routes. And again, most of these have alternative service or a very low ridership. The next slide is Saturday and gives a little bit different picture, slightly different geography. Same type of strategy was applied here. And then on Sunday is the last map. Slide. Next slide. So we've had a lot of communication on how we're handling these. There's actually information on our website right now for customers and stakeholders to see what those changes are on a route level basis. And some of the information that I've covered here is on our webpage. And if anyone goes to metrotransit.org, there's an icon on the front page that talks about the December changes. We've been reaching out to stakeholders and partner agencies to make sure we're coordinated in our efforts to make those changes a reality. And some of them may include adjusting bus stop locations or making sure there's other accommodations in place. So between now and December 4th, we'll continue to add information to our website. We'll be posting rider alerts. We'll be having staff out in the field, making sure customers are aware of the changes that are coming. And the schedules will be available in the trip planner online November 20th. Next slide. I'm going to end on this one, and I wanted to get here before going back to the map slides where people might have questions. But it's really important to note that we'll be evaluating the whole system as we move forward into 2022. We certainly will continue hiring, doing our best to put our best foot forward for our customers. We'll be continuing to review the express market. I'll note that there continues to be about 40 routes that are suspended from when we made our initial change back in March in 2020. So we're looking at all the long-term outcomes that we expect, and certainly we'll be doing a service equity evaluation as part of that work. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Adam. Are there questions or comments from council members? I have one question. So it sounds like we're doing a lot of communication leading up to December 4th. Are we going to have people out like the first week of these changes in place? Are we going to have additional customer support personnel available? Because there are enough significant changes that I would think we'd want to make sure we can respond quickly.
Madam Chair, absolutely. We'll have staff on the street. We've got a number of things in play. We have not only Orange Line, but we have a lot of routes that are pretty significant changes for some customers, and we'll make sure to have staff out to make sure those customers know what's happening and what their alternatives are.
Perfect, thank you. Any additional questions or comments? All right, I'm not seeing any. Well, thank you, Adam, and I hope that I'm looking forward to hearing how this goes, because I know there's a lot of shifting, but it seems like we're working with the right priorities in mind. And so, but I would like to hear. I'm looking forward to hearing back how it all goes as we implement these changes. We have one final round for council members. Anyone else? All right. Well, thank you, Adam.
Great, thank you.
All right. Well, that concludes our information items for the evening. So with that, unless there is anything from council members, pause for a second. All right. We can be adjourned for the evening. Everyone have a great evening.
Wonderful. You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye now.